So my name is Peter Jarek. I head up the GSMA Intelligence team, and I'm going to do a bit of an introduction, a bit of a context setting before you hear from the smart people who are going to tell you a bit about sort of really what's important, how we're thinking about sustainability, how we should be thinking about it, and what we're doing going forward. And I think, early on and probably mid-year when we started thinking about this, we thought to ourselves, is this an important enough topic to run a summit here at the show? And we knew it was, and the question was, is this enough that the rest of the industry gets? And so I'm super, super honored that we have great sponsors, right? And so you see the great sponsors like AMD, like vechain, and I can just say, stick around to the end. Going to be some great, really innovative stuff that you'll hear from vechain, from the ARM folks, from Intel. We've got a great set of sponsors who really highlight. I mean, we're not talking about small companies. We're talking about really big, important companies that are driving the industry, and that highlights how important this topic is. So thank you all for being here. And there we go. So for those of you who don't know, GSMA Intelligence is the research and consulting arm of the GSMA. I'm sure some of you are customers, some of you have access to our content. If you don't, please reach out. We'd be happy to tell you about it. You can get an idea of who we are, but was anyone here at the keynote this morning? The big keynote? So when you sat at the keynote, I sort of joked with my team, right? The keynote was really just Mach, the Director General, repeating data from my team. Right, the number of 5G connections, the usage gap. We supply all that data. We drive that intelligence. Hopefully a lot of you have access to it. If not, reach out. But the reason why you're here is because we also do a lot of research around sustainability. We know it's an important topic, and so what are we going to do? Now, for those of you, because I knew it was going to happen as soon as I said this, taking pictures of the slides, don't worry. If you had your badge scanned, we will send you the slides. You'll be able to get these afterwards. Same thing with the video. No need to take pictures of this, right? But I appreciate it. It says that we must be putting up good content. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, a couple things, right? One, why is sustainability important? Right? And the idea that there is a bit of a twin imperative, the business side of things, but also the climate, right? How are we thinking then about sustainability? What are we doing to make this a reality? How are we chipping away, getting closer to that net zero goal that we all have? Of course, talking a bit about monetization, right? What is the monetization angle? Because we know operators, they need to make moves towards net zero, but they also need to make money. And then of course, we're going to talk about a few things which may be new. One, how does cloud fit in? And then how do we think about all this together? So you're going to hear about this across the day from a number of panels. I'm going to kick off some context, what we're seeing from GSMA Intelligence. We're going to have a keynote from AMD and Lenovo, then 3 panels, well, 2 panels and a fireside chat, then we're going to end with a keynote. My colleague Tim will be running the panels, and these are the speaker lineup. So again, I mentioned this before, we're going to have a great set of folks, right? AMD, Intel, right? We've got Lenovo who will be there for the first keynote, and then we've got folks like Kaban. Wonderful story in terms of how we should be thinking about sustainability beyond just energy efficiency, right? We're going to have Ericsson here. We've got some folks from the GSMA who can talk about what we're doing in terms of how we think about circularity. It's going to cover sustainability from all angles, and so I appreciate you guys being here. Please stick around. So, at a very basic level, when we think about, and my team thinks about sustainability and why it matters in 2023 and how we've been thinking about it, there's a few things. Right? We've all been talking about 5G, and we know the 5G story. So how does that fit in, and how should we be thinking about 5G? But we know that at the same time, 5G has impacts on sustainability in terms of what it means as a sustainable technology, what it means in terms of driving new data. It also comes with rethinking networks, moving more towards virtualization, and we need to be thinking about the impacts there. Because we all know 5G isn't just a new technology, it's driving network changes. In terms of how we virtualize networks, what does that mean? We need to be thinking about that. And then as much as we can think about all of this sort of in an esoteric way of being efficient with our networks, how do we handle traffic more efficiently, we need to recognize For operators, it's more than just energy efficiency, cost savings. It's also about their reputation. Their names are on the line. Stakeholders, their customers, everyone's looking at them to say, how are you handling this? That needs to be part of that discussion. We'll be having that discussion today. It's part of what we think about as we look at the market. We put out our research and insights. There we go. So I think hopefully a lot of you already know this. But from an operator perspective, and you hear this a lot, mobile operators have been leaders in terms of making net zero commitments. And you see the commitments that are out there, right? And the timelines for what they're doing that across different regions. The story's pretty clear though, right? You see those top bars are all in the 80% range, right? We know operators have made this commitment towards being net zero, right? Net zero commitments, the mobile industry has led. But we also know that operators can't just be thinking about this as a cost center. Yes, this is something that's important that they need to do. They recognize that. At the same time, they're being pushed by shareholders, by stakeholders to generate more profits. Revenue upside, but being more profitable, looking at the bottom line. So how do they balance that? And I swear I have an answer for how they balance that as soon... I'm leaving you hanging for a reason. There we go. Or did I move forward 2 slides? There we go. Wonderful. Whew, I made it work. I think Abby was in the way. I think you were standing up. You were blocking the receiver. I mean, so we know that that's a challenge. And I think more than that, we recognize that there is this issue where as we look at how you meet customer demands, we've got these new energy intensities, right? 5G is great, but it also means more traffic. We have a lot more data-intense use cases. At the same time, we know that operators have to think about what they can do in terms of technologies like 5G. How do we move towards 5G? Because it is more spectrally efficient. It is more energy efficient. How do we think about virtualizing traffic loads, and what does that mean for energy efficiency? How do we think about things like 2G and 3G shutdowns? If 5G and 4G are more efficient, how do we get onto those technologies? And then I think why I'm excited about the panel at the end of the day is how do we think about circularity? How do we think about renewables? Because it can't just be about energy efficiency. But most importantly, and I showed that, if you look at that slide that I showed before in terms of the timeline, this is something that is very important today, but something that's going to take decades as we think about how we get to those net zero commitments, but how we roll this stuff out. The third time's the charm when I hit it. There we go. And I think what's nice though is also recognizing that, and hopefully you've all seen this in the show. A big focus of the show here has been how do we think about the B2B side of the telco business? Right? We've got all the major operators with their B2B side of things. What's nice then, and important for us to think about, is that as operators think about this, as operators and they're looking at how they become more sustainable, it matches what those customer bases on the vertical sides are thinking. So if we go out and we look at our research when we talk to the verticals and how those verticals can get to net zero, how they can reach their sustainability commitments, what do we see? Yep, renewables and being energy efficient with their operations across the key verticals, right? Telecoms, yes. But then, as we think about manufacturing, as we think about healthcare, everyone recognizes these are the challenges. It's not just being energy efficient with your own operations, it is also how do we think about renewables, how do we think about circularity in general. Look at that. I mentioned a bit about telco and cloud. And for us this is important because it's part of the discussion that we don't often see getting a lot of attention in terms of sustainability. When you talk about sustainability in mobile, you hear a lot about base station sleep solutions. You do hear some renewables. You do hear some circularity. But we need to recognize that as you look at the telco network, it is moving more towards virtualization, it's moving more towards cloud, and we need to think about what that means. So our team's been looking at that, and there's some interesting takeaways, right? That if you look at it, on the one hand, it's a pretty good story. If we look at the cloud side of things, if we look at the telco side of things from a mobile operator perspective, they're actually a fairly minor share of what's taking place in terms of global energy usage, right? 1%. But we know that energy usage is going up. So it really is the idea that 1% is a small share of a big number. And so there's a lot of room here, whether it's on the cloud side or the mobile side, to think about how are we more efficient, because that number is big, even if we're only talking about 1% of that number. And there we go. Now, I said this before, and I think it's worthwhile to put some numbers here, because it's part of what we do at GSMA Intelligence, is trying to drive some insights from data. And what I talked about is sort of this 5G paradox, right? We know 5G is more energy efficient than 4G, 3G, 2G, right? If we're thinking about energy efficiency, of how we're thinking about this in terms of energy per amount of data, more efficient, great. But we also know that as 5G scales, and it scales to be a larger share of the customer base of mobile connections as we go through 2025, then we're still going to be seeing data usage going up, which means overall energy is an issue that we need to be looking at. So the answer of 5G is great is part of the answer. We need to get off of 2G and 3G as much as we can and towards 5G, but we also need to keep thinking about how we chip away. How can we be more efficient? Because those are big numbers. There we go. So this should, in 2023, go without saying. But one thing that I think is particularly important, and we've made a point of in our team a number of times, is this idea that we can talk about this. And it's why I mentioned that, yes, you know, the 5G story is great, but we need to show some data to back it up. As we think about energy efficiency as well, this also means we need to be thinking about benchmarking our progress. Because we can talk about the progress we've made, and anecdotes are wonderful, right? And we can think about how this looks and what we're doing, but unless we're measuring it, unless we're actually doing a good job of actually tracking the usage and how we're being more efficient, we can't see where we're making that progress. We can't see where those gaps need to be filled, right? And in terms of the network side of things, in terms of geography, in terms of how we're moving beyond the network, right? We can't really see how vendors are doing a better job, one versus the other. And you're going to hear some great stories here today, but we need to be benchmarking this. And I say this in part because we are, right? If you look at my team, GSMA Intelligence, we work with operators around the world. We're benchmarking their energy usage. If you're an operator out there and you want to be a part of that, encourage you to engage with us, because we can help you understand how you compare to some of your competitors. But it's critical because we need to understand the progress we're making. Those benchmarks are particularly important. Again, reach out. We're kicking off our next project very soon. It's really immensely important, not just for yourselves, but for the industry as a whole. So please reach out to us. And last, you know, I mentioned early on that it's not just sort of about energy efficiency and costs and climate. It is also about reputation. And we need to be thinking about this other part of reputation with stakeholders, reputation with consumers. And so you ask this question because it's also what I kicked off, the twin imperative, right? We need to get to net zero. Operators need to continue to drive profits. So there's this question of, will consumers pay for efficiency? We know they care. All the surveys say that. We know when you talk especially younger generations, it's important to them. But the question is, will they actually pay for it? The research says yes. When we go look at our data, the consumers we talk to, what do we see? Yeah, we see that, you know, in most countries, there is a reasonable amount of consumers who will pay a premium for efficiency. How do we take advantage of that? That's up to us to figure out. Part of, I think, what we'll discuss the rest of the day. There we go. Of course, I think the reality is, and this is a big part of the reason why we're here today, and a big part of the reason why I'm glad we can be putting it on this summit, is that for a lot of cases, for the operators, they recognize that yes, they understand why they need to be net zero, have those commitments, why they need to move in that direction. But most operators also recognize they're not moving fast enough, right? They understand where they are at the C-suite, but how you move that into the product side of things, it's not easy. Right? It's one thing to say it at the highest level that we're going to be doing this. It's another thing to make it a reality. At the same point, as much as we can say that consumers might actually pay for this, trying to make it a selling point, it's not easy. How do you sell that? This is new ground for all of them. And so you look at it. When we look at the operators and we say, hey, do you see sustainability and your movements there being a strength or a weakness? The numbers here, they speak for themselves, right? Operators don't see this as a strength yet. We need to help them figure that out. We need to help them recognize how it can be a strength and execute on some of those consumer demands and the opportunities that they can do to actually be more efficient. Of course, this is the other part I talked about, which I think is also very critical, is that as we think about what can be done in the network side of things, as we think about this, looking at cloud technologies, looking at virtualization, looking at things like Open RAN, right? This is an emerging discussion, this is new. And we know Open RAN, I expected it to be a bigger discussion here at the show, maybe we'll see more. How do we think about those new technologies, right? Because we hear from the ecosystem that there's ways to look at virtualization, look at things like Open RAN to drive more efficiency in networks. This needs to be a big part of the discussion, because when we look at it and we talk to operators, we see that there's this interest, right? We see that they think, whether it's from better baseband processing, automation support, whether it's because of just cooling solutions that you can deliver in a more efficient way with Open RAN, they see some opportunities there. Again, it's now on us to execute on those. Can you move the slide? Look at that. That's even the better way, just using that. Of course, the virtualization discussion is interesting, whether that means in terms of traditional ways of architecting the networks, Open RAN, but the other thing we need to dig into is, as we think about this, we know those virtual workloads can be placed in multiple places, somewhere in the cloud, somewhere in the edge. We need to be thinking about how does that impact our sustainability decisions as well. We've got some new research coming out, encourage you all to check it out, but looking at that very question, we know, and operators have a view of where those workloads are going, from the edge to the core, into the cloud. How are they going to be placing those workloads? Where will processing be done? Those decisions come with very critical energy usage implications. There are implications to running your workloads at the edge versus somewhere in the cloud. We need to be thinking about that, right? So if you look at some of the work that we've done, we've shown that running at the edge can be more efficient. This is something that operators need to be thinking about as they're trying to get to their net zero commitments and being more efficient. Thank you. So I guess the question is where do we go from here? And I think top level, I think we need to be thinking about this in three ways. Technology, right? The technology is also going to be the discussion. Whether it's the impacts of Open RAN, of virtualization, how we're just being more efficient with our RAN solutions, that's going to be there, right? I think the fact that our sponsors today include folks like AMD, like Intel, like ARM, points to the fact there's a lot of work that can be done there on the technology side, particularly on the virtualization side of things. We're going to hear more about that throughout the day. But there also has to be more than that. It has to be around partnerships, around business models. We have to be thinking about scope 3. Scope 1, 2 are great, but scope 3, how do we think about renewals? How do we think about circularity? That needs to be a part of the solution. And then final, the regulatory side of things. We can't have any discussion here without thinking about how regulation fits in, right? How is this being driven by government action? How is this being driven by the way we procure and how regulation impacts that? And I'm excited that we have across the day a bunch of people who can help us talk about that. So with that, I hope we're going to have a great set of debates today. I'm glad to see more people have filled out. I am more than happy to talk to 0 people and draw them in. So thank you for those of you who came in. I'm going to hand over to our first keynote of the day. And then after that, my colleague Tim will be handling the He'll be handling all the panels and fireside chats. So with that, can we have the folks from Lenovo and AMD to give our first keynote?
So hello Vegas. Hello, hello. So what we have today is a presentation with my good friend John. Peter is the other guy. John. I'm Dominic from Lenovo. I lead the telco business unit. And so we're going to do a couple of things today. We're going to talk about sustainability, what we do from a company perspective. But then we'll jump very quickly into some news that we have. So both AMD and Lenovo has released a new set of products we believe has really broken the barrier of the next generation sustainability in terms of performance also. And so we want to talk a little bit about that.
Hey, good afternoon. My name is John Morris from AMD, and I've got the privilege of running our enterprise business, so I get to work with great partners like Dominique at Lenovo. And so we're excited to be here today and talk really about sustainability and what both companies are doing, and that'll lead into, as Dom said, a new product announcement from both of us.
All right, so let's kick it off, John. Right?
Yeah.
Let me see if that works.
All right, we're going to do kind of this interweaving presentation. So I'll have a slide. He'll have a slide. We thought it would be a little more interactive and show really the strength of the partnership between the two companies and what we're trying to jointly do together between the products, the microprocessors that AMD designs and brings to market, and then built a product, Lenovo building a product around those processors. So if we talk about sustainability, it's obviously extremely important today. We're hearing more and more from CEOs that are running large corporations, obviously CIOs, really about the importance of sustainability. And I think really over the last 2 years, it's gone from just being it's a nice to have and let's kind of talk about it because it makes us feel good to really C-level officers today are being compensated, bonused based on real sustainability metrics. And so the joint solutions that AMD and Lenovo can bring to market address some of those sustainability efforts and some of the goals that companies have. I'm really proud to say that before sustainability became kind of a hot, a buzzword over really the last couple of years, I'll start with back in 2007, AMD moved into a new facility in Austin, Texas, and actually it was one of the kind of the first award-winning green certified campuses. The design of our corporate office is such that we actually capture all of our rainwater and use all of it. We have different certifications around heating and lighting and sustainability, and again that was going back to 2007 and kind of the vision of building a new campus in Austin, Texas, and knowing that was becoming increasingly important, and so. Really, kind of, there's three efforts for us, and I mentioned the first effort, and that's really at AMD, in terms of sustainability and reducing greenhouse effects. It's really about minimizing our environmental impact at AMD. From the campus that we have to our efforts working with our supply chain to make sure that on an annual basis we have corporate initiatives and goals that we actually publicly report on to make sure that we are minimizing the impact and improving sustainability efforts. And then we innovate and we collaborate. We have a lot of different partners, like TSMC is an example, Lenovo. So we are working with those partners from a supply chain perspective in order to make sure that we're kind of on the cutting edge of reducing our impact on the environment, and then designing our products. And so you're going to hear about a new product today. It's a new 8000 series of EPYC processors. We call it. It's our code name for it is Sienna, and we're going to be talking about that product and why it's a product that provides really performance per watt per dollar, and has some unique opportunities to help companies with sustainability. All right, Dom.
Yeah, so you'll see we're pretty interweaved. I think that's how partnerships are, right? So you'll see some of the themes coming back. At the company level, we do a lot of things, certainly also for sustainability. So I think in the GSMA mentioned that 85% of the mobile operator are considering sustainability as the priority number one. So I think it's important to look at it. I think from experience and the work we've done in the field and talking to customers, that's absolutely top of the presentation. So in terms of anecdote, I don't know if I told you this one, John, but I met an operator in Europe, and we went into a product presentation. These kind of product presentation, I'm sure you do. But the first question we got was, what are you doing in terms of scope 1, 2, and 3? What are you doing, in fact, in terms of reducing the power of that machine? And I'm going like, hey, let me go to the speeds and feeds and functionality of that thing. And then, in fact, it was straight into scope discussions. But joke aside, it's a very serious thing. The theme of this event here is all about innovation and collaboration and ecosystem. Meeting and exceeding net zero target that I think everybody has in terms of organization on this floor is going to require a lot of collaboration, a lot of innovation. And so we're doing that also in different form in our organization. So you see a couple of examples here. They all relate to scope 1, 2, and 3 type of emission initiatives. I think the first realization that we really had is, we have to think differently. We are not just a segment into a linear supply chain. We're not just a chain. We are participating in a circular economy. And the way we look at our product, the way we look at our life cycle of the product, especially in the telco environment where life cycles tend to be very long compared to enterprises, we have to think, product development, product manufacturing, and supply chain very differently. So I think the first lessons that we've implemented is those sustainability goals that we want to achieve. We have a science-based target of being net zero by 2050. But in order to get there, there's a lot of efforts that needs to come. And first of all, is really a change of mindset. So thinking circular as opposed to linear is probably one of the biggest lessons. Then, of course, we have a massive supply chain. I think most of you know us from a server and PC business. We ship roughly one new device every minute throughout our own manufacturing environment. So everything we can do on the supply chain has a straight up material impact in terms of sustainability. And so things like biopackaging, looking at the packaging, looking at what we can do with plastic in particular, these have massive type of impact. So just to put things in perspective, reusing carbon and using bio material for packaging, that cuts roughly 500 tons for us per year on a yearly basis. Those are from last year. So quite significant CO2 offset there. But then we are our own manufacturing, so we have our own supply chain, but also our own manufacturing plants. So looking at low cold, low heat type of exchange in the manufacturing itself. So putting all those components on a motherboard, can deliver some significant benefit also. So we've done it for our own manufacturing, but I've also asked our supplier to do the same thing. And that netted us 10,000 tons of CO2 offset also. So when you accumulate all these initiatives, you start really grinding at that net zero target at the same time. And water cooling technology is something we have since roughly 10 years now. We are the 6th version of our Neptune cooling technology. This is something we've been really putting into the field from a high-performance computing environment. And since last year, we brought this into general purpose server. So, normal server, either in an enterprise or in a telco environment, can now be water cooled. The gain for that is just enormous. So instead of using air and ventilators and fans and all of that, where we can probably remove 8% of the power consumed by a server by just removing the fans, but we get another 20 to 30%, in fact, power reduction by using water to cooling the server. And the heat that's been extracted, it can then be also recycled. So the numbers we have from a general purpose and HPC server shows that we can reduce the power consumed by roughly 40%. So quite significant performance there. So what does that mean, John, from a telco environment? So So how does that relate to edge and other telco environment?
Yeah, I think so. From our standpoint, even though we are an ingredient, we're out in the market every day talking again to partners like Lenovo, talking to end customers and trying to better understand the use cases. And the use cases goes beyond just the server itself. It goes into the environment that it's in. That it's going to operate in, and then we're bringing that information back into AMD, and so our roadmap goes out 3, 4, 5 years, and we're actually looking at that kind of information and what's going on in the marketplace to best decide how we're going to build out our product. So there's kind of three things that we see in the market today. There's obviously a challenge from a power perspective and space availability. I actually have a friend who's the chief technology officer of a visual effects company in downtown London. And so, when he sits down and talks to me about, old power grid, so that he's actually has to be careful. They're trying to keep the number of offices that they have to a minimum. And so when he talks to me about power grid, we're talking about adding visual effects artists. There's a balance there in terms of the available power coming into that grid, what he can put into his data center so that his visual artists have access to the latest machines in order to do the visual effects. And so we also have to think about this. And that's way down our value chain, but we have to think about power and we have to think about space because it's becoming more challenging. And then the second area obviously is extreme environments. We know I was actually up visiting my parents not long ago in small town Nebraska. And temperate environment, and Amazon is building a data center there. Well, a data center there in a temperate environment is going to be a lot different than building a data center somewhere, in, let's say, Austin, Texas, where I'm from, where, all summer long it's been 110 degrees. And so we have to think about that in terms of, how efficiently are our microprocessors going to operate, and then in and of themselves, what kind of cooling are they going to need, and then put it into a solution, what's going to happen there, and how do we get the maximum performance while minimizing the power and the cooling that's going to have to go through that solution. And then I think the third piece that's becoming even more important, and it depends on the environment that you're in, is when you start putting servers in a data center, they're loud. You've all been there. But as we put more and more devices out on the edge, we want things to be quieter. We want things to run cooler because people notice those things. I was unfortunately spent a little time in the hospital recently. And it was interesting to note. A couple of things. One is that all the nurses have their own mobile workstation now, and then I also noticed edge devices all around the hospital. But I noticed those things because that's what I do for a living. Most people don't notice those things unless there's some kind of noise or heat coming out of those things. And so, as a company, as a microprocessor company, we have to think about those things jointly with our partner Lenovo.
So I think by now you get a little bit how we tag team on this one. So what I want to share before we jump into something very specific to or both of us is everything we do in terms of sustainability has to go from that change of mentality, so business model thinking, supply chain, technology and services. So it's only by combining all these things together and putting all of that thinking into a product that you can really materialize and have tangible results out of that. So here's a couple of examples of initiatives that we have. So I'm clicking a little bit down to a bit more details. So Neptune I mentioned already, so this is the water cooling part. At the supply chain level, by packaging and building the pods or building the racks, really at the manufacturing side, we are able to reduce significant packaging, significant time, but also significant transport cost at the same time. So the bottom layer, the TrueScale is our brand for infrastructure as a services. So the three things on the bottom is in fact services related. So we've got business model, we've got technology, and we've got supply chain, and we've got in fact services. So TrueScale is in fact our IaaS, meaning infrastructure as a service, where instead of over provisioning, over building more capacity, you can really consume and really only use and pay for what you really need. So that's one benefit also there, tangible benefit. The CO2 offset services are very new services that we've launched beginning of this year. It allows the customer, in fact, to offset the CO2 emission. So for every single of our product right now, we work with the United Nations, so customers can then select their favorite United Nations green emission initiative, and then in exchange of that, they can get an offset on the CO2 emissions that we have. And so of course they can report that at the bottom line of their ESG report and show that as a benefit from a CO2 offset perspective. Because we have looked at all this, the emission linked to the manufacturing, R&D, transport, and operation of our systems. So we know now exactly what the CO2 emission is for our product, and we want to offset that and allow our customers to put that also into the ESG report. Asset recovery services, I mentioned circular economy. What can we do in fact to recycle the equipment, reuse the equipment, repurpose the equipment, and repair the equipment also. We have a customer that in fact, a joint customer, that in fact require us to, basically whenever we sell 10 server, requires 2 of those servers to be completely recycled servers. So instead of buying 10 new, in fact he buys only 8 new, right? And 2 of them are systematically repaired or recycled services. So now, John, big news for us.
Big news.
Big news for both of us in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about what AMD has done recently, and then I'll turn it back over to Dom. So we have launched our 8000 4 series generation of microprocessors recently. So if you read the public articles, this is we are on our Italian tour. So we started back in 2017 with our first generation called Naples, and then in 2019 we launched Rome, and then we went to Milan, and then Genoa last year, and now we're launching a new product called Siena. So we're on our Italian tour. Now the uniqueness of Siena really is because of the design and the manufacturability through our partner TSMC. Really, this product is leading performance per watt per dollar, and I'll show a little bit more to you about that. But it's a very purposeful design that will address workloads in the edge. It'll address. We've got products that are going to be coming out for telco and VRAN. And then there's other workloads, so this product will fit into because of the performance per watt per dollar that we can provide, and we'll show some more about that. These things are extremely energy efficient, and that's been kind of AMD's banner over the last, particularly since over the last several years in particular. So because of the design of the products as well as how they're being manufactured, we can normally what happens is that you got to put more energy into something to get more performance out of it. And in our case, we actually can put in successive generations with some of these processors, particularly this one, we can actually put less energy in it and still get more performance out of it. So what does that mean for customers that are looking at some kind of server deployment? So there's a couple of scenarios here. One scenario is for customers who need they want the next generation of performance. Maybe they've got 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old data center deployment. It means if they need more performance, we can give you more performance using less energy. And in some cases, we can actually, we can do 2, 3, 4x more performance using the same number of servers, Or if you said, hey, I want to keep kind of the same level of performance that I've got today, or maybe even a little bit better, we can actually deploy fewer servers. And it all depends on the workload, obviously, but we've seen cases where the ratio could be, you've got 25 servers deployed today, and tomorrow you could deploy 5 servers and still have the same level or better performance and energy savings from AMD. And so one of the things that we've been doing, we actually have specialists that can help out with this, is helping you look at what your data center deployment looks like, what it needs to be in the future. They can actually calculate what you would need from a deployment perspective. We know, again, we're all here because of sustainability. We can actually translate that in the US. We can translate that into how much carbon you'd be saving the environment, how many acres of forest you could be saving. If we go over to Europe, we can talk about hectare-acres. So we can translate that so that to meet your data center needs, obviously, but also be able to build a story around it, around sustainability and how much greenhouse emissions you may be saving or other natural materials. So we have that ability. The other thing is again, as I think we said this earlier, is around the operating environment. So these processors will operate. I was looking at it was all in Celsius, so I had of course I had to translate it into Fahrenheit. But we're looking at an operating environment of below freezing, 23 degrees, on up to even hotter than Austin was this summer, up to 185 degrees. So there's a lot of flexibility in how these microprocessors will operate within the solutions that our customers are deploying for different kinds of environments. So again, this is the 8004 series Sienna-based processors. They come from 8 core on up to 64 core, depending on what kind of workload that you need to use. And we have our sales specialists working in conjunction with Lenovo are able to help you size up what you need.
So what we've done essentially is taking a great new CPU, right? We worked on this for like the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Right, you had Sienna as a code name. We had Mont Blanc.
Yeah.
Because Mont Blanc, we thought we needed mountain. You guys are picking, Italian village or Italian cities. we take mountains in our code names, right. And we thought we'll take Monte Bianco, which is an Italian mountain, right? So, but we took Mont Blanc because the boss is French speaking, so yes. we'll take that. So this is essentially the Mont Blanc product, SE455, the V3. So we took that high power silicon, very energy efficient. And we thought that with everything that we have been presenting about sustainability, we'll bring all of that into that platform and create a very powerful platform, very energy efficient platform, but also making sure it's in the right form factor. So we're talking here like an edge computing platform, which then fits more nicely into carrier grade network, both in terms of the core, both in terms of the radio environment. But this is still an edge device, meaning all the environmental, so we go from Nebraska temperature -5 to Austin +55 temperature. It's a very silent noise level because these kind of platforms are being put in street cabinets, wall cabinets sometimes, rooftops. You don't want to have a screaming engine, that does 120 decibel of noise in those locations. You want something that's just conversation level in terms of noise. It has typically dusty environment, very environmental, sensible type of environment. It's an edge device too, meaning anybody can really go and have access to that street cabinet, open a street cabinet potentially and try to tamper with the equipment. So there's lots of features on the security side. So there's anti-tampering features that we have on the server. The data is completely encrypted, so anybody going into the server cannot really even access anything. The data is being completely encrypted on the server. So we leverage absolutely the 64 core, so this is really packing a lot of punch in terms of performance compared to the traditional type of processor and type of systems we have on this. But the biggest gain that we saw, and thanks to the collaboration we've done, we've seen a 50% power efficiency per performance. So back to the watt dollar ratio that we have, it's just cutting by half everything that's on the market right now. So we believe it's pretty significant. So you see what we've done. We've taken some significant innovation from the silicon side, put that in a form factor that's really relevant using edge computing type of environment. And when you throw that now in a carrier network, you have some tremendous benefit. Some of our early calculations show that we can probably remove around 20 to 30 gigawatt per hour per year type of energy, which is quite significant. And that, if you, depending on the tariff for the customer, on the electricity tariff for the customer, that's probably like 10, 15, sometimes close to $18 million of savings that a customer can take just by deploying this on a mid-sized type of network. The other part also that we've done with this platform, we looked at the hardware itself, so the form factor, the size and everything, but we also looked at the whole stack, making sure that we have zero touch provisioning, making sure that we have automation, task automation, that we also can virtualize as much as possible, making sure that we can run VNFs and CNF the best way, and then have orchestration. The product comes also with some energy management, so customers can definitely look at their energy levels, energy settings, power drain and power draw from that device, and really have a very detailed view and very detailed management on the platform. Last but not least, it comes also with the CO2 offset that I was referring to. For something like less than $200, we offset 20 tons of CO2, because that's roughly what we have calculated in terms of production, transport, and normal operation. So $200 gives you, 20 ton of CO2 offset with the device. So we believe it's quite innovative in terms of the services we wrap around the whole stack, including management, including element management, including orchestration, including microservices orchestration is all part of that device. So tell us a little bit about performance, John.
Yeah, we'll talk about performance. The other thing I would say is on the microprocessor side, we do actually have NEBS compliant SKUs as well in the stack. So if that's something that's needed, we do make those available. We're all about performance, and so we look from a microprocessor perspective. Back in Austin, we're always looking at performance for different workloads. We're looking at across different benchmarks. And so I could have filled probably 20 minutes of just benchmarks. I chose not to do that. But I wanted to just kind of give you a flavor again. When we talk about performance per watt per dollar, that's really important. So this is a benchmark called TCP IoT. So it's supposed to simulate a lot of devices sending information into a server, and then that server taking all of that data, all that information, and processing it. And so from a relative performance perspective, you can see over here, and we're always looking at our competitor. This is one of their this is the 8 core actually for both us and our competitor. So this is the low end of the stack, and even at the low end of the stack, you're getting about 20%, over 20% performance versus our competitor. What's actually becomes more interesting is when we're looking at performance per dollar per watt. Then we're talking about really almost 2x that you're getting out of that, because that processor is so efficient. We can boost the clock speed, we can keep the wattage low, we can actually throw not only 8 cores at it, we can throw 16 threads at it. Actually, the product manager is telling me it's lower at 75 watts, and it can go. It's actually thermally designed to go up to that, but it can go lower depending on, again, what kind of workload you're throwing at it. So it's an extremely efficient processor, and that's why from a performance per dollar per watt, or performance per watt per dollar, we can get this kind of performance out of it, which is almost 2x. So really excited to have this new processors and make them available. And Lenovo has done such a great job of building that new ThinkEdge SC455 around it. So thanks for doing that.
Thanks for providing such silicon. So in terms of closing, we've seen different use case. With the early release and early engagement we had with customers, we have identified 6 use cases, 3 of which are in fact for enterprise services, so enterprise resale services, and 3 of which are in fact for telecom core infrastructure type of applications. But I think on the theme of this event, we need also to say that it has quite some significant power in terms of AI. It has enough slot there to put 6 of your GPU cards in there, or any accelerators that you want and fancy to have. So we believe that there's quite a lot of expansion possibilities and accelerator possibilities in the platform at the same time. So, so why don't you take us home, John?
All right. So we know, again, sustainability is what, as I said in the beginning, it's become just not a brand now, but as I said, it's now part of many corporations' annual awards to their C-level, even lower. As AI is now all the buzzword, it's an opportunity really within telco and with edge to go from data center on out to that edge and make sure that we can tell that story around sustainability with these innovative products that Lenovo provides, along with, again, there's an insatiable demand in the marketplace, obviously. I think there's like 50 billion connected devices, and all of that information out there has got to be harnessed, and that takes performance, and usually it takes a lot of power. So again, what AMD has done is designed a class of processors that can take all of that information in a very power efficient way, help companies process it through the solutions like Lenovo is providing to make it actionable intelligence. Again, all doing that under the guise of we want to lower our carbon footprint, we want to make sure that we're talking and supporting sustainability efforts in the marketplace. That's what we're doing.
Thanks, John. So in closing, I know we are on time, but if you have any questions or want to know more, please then come and see us. If the clicker moves, come and see us right now, or come and visit us on the suite that we have on the second floor. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks.
We are going to move to, this first panel, looking at how we tackle sustainability in the telco network. We're going to have Ericsson, we're going to have Accenture, we're going to have Intel. So Bhushan, Fernando, and Christina, come on up to the stage, please. Yeah. So turning it. All right. Guys, we've had a good intro session looking at some of the data and analysis, and then kind of from a product perspective, looking at how the sustainability pledges get translated into action. We've got about half an hour for this panel, and what I wanted to do is sort of go at a high level and then get into more detail about what sustainability means in practice for the telecom sector and how different partners can affect that. So kind of first question, let's just go back to the strategic rationale of why people are going green, both from an environmental and business perspective. And Bhushan, I guess we'll start with you. I mean, I'm interested to hear from each of you what you think the main drivers for this transition are, and how we think about that, in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, no, happy to do it, and thank you so much for this opportunity, and great to be here on this panel. I'm sure we'll have a really good discussion. So I think there are kind of 3 key drivers that are behind this strategic move towards green and sustainability, and I'll kind of pick them off one by one, but they're not in any particular order. The first one is financial. So, we talked about energy cost already being one of the top 5 OPEX categories for telco and telecommunication companies, right? So as the world digitizes, as data traffic grows, energy consumption is going up because of the cost and consumption. So focusing on reducing energy consumption is a key business priority. The second objective is the environmental objective. So we driver. So we talked about the net zero objective, right? So climate science is clear. This timeline is set. We know that we need to cut emissions by half and reach net zero by 2040, 2050 at the latest. So that's what we need to do as an industry. The good news is that the industry has aligned behind this, and there is a standard that the ITU has developed that provides the ICT sector clear directions in how to go about reaching net zero. And net zero encompasses the entire value chain, so not just the company operations, but beyond it. So that's kind of the second key driver. And I think the GSMA report, Tim talked about 43 or 46% of telco operators by revenue have already committed to net zero. So that's a big commitment from operators that we see. And then the final one, I think, is the social side, right? And when you think about, the Gen Z, 95% of them own at least one smartphone, maybe some two. They want companies to be active. They want companies to focus on addressing some of the social and environmental issues that we face as a planet and society. So those are kind of three, I feel like, key drivers that are really pushing our industry towards taking this on, not just as a business and sustainability imperative.
Yeah. No, that's well said. Christina, let's come to you. I mean, you've got a perch looking across the sector. How do you think about the drivers for this transition and speak at it both from an environmental and a business perspective?
Yeah, you covered it really well. So it's I'm going to have to think hard to come up with some new things here, because you really cover it well. But look, the reality is, most of us are feeling a responsibility toward the future generations, so leave a planet in a better way, or to have a sustainable planet for them. So this is go from the human part. This is important for many of us. Then if you look at the business side, think about it, right? Most of the people, and especially the new generations, probably have a problem buying products from companies that don't care about sustainability and about the environment. So there you go. That's a business reason if you haven't think about that before. And similarly, many of us would not want to work for a company that doesn't care about the environment. You take, for example, and I'll talk about my own experience. I work for Intel. It's important for me. We have this mission where we are creating world-changing technology to enhance the life of everyone on the planet. That's our mission, right? Well, you can't do that unless you are thinking about sustainability, and that's what we're doing. We have really ambitious goals on sustainability. So I think I think it's a moment. It requires multiple things. It requires commitment, but I think pretty much the industry is committed, agreeing that this is the way to go, and committed to go into that path.
Fernando, let's round out this question with yourself. I mean, do you concur with what's been said here, or how would you build on any of it, add to it?
100% on agreement. I think it's pretty clear. It's almost like your business card. What are you doing to be sustainable? What are you doing for the world? That comes with every RFP you answer. It has to come with that. So I will probably add just the regulatory piece of it.
Yes.
Some countries are pushing operators to meet this. So it's an additional thing to do on top of that.
We'll get more into the competitive dynamics of this, and I want to come back to some of the charts actually Peter showed at the start, looking at to what extent operators and others view this as a sort of competitive advantage versus a weakness. But first, let's get into the network a little bit more. So I mean, when we talk about scope 1 and 2 emissions, which is the electricity that emanates from your direct operations and the electricity you produce, the emissions from that, the network accounts for about 90% of energy costs and utilization in an average operator. So it's the lion's share. And so it's no surprise that that's where most of the activity has focused so far. Now, maybe, Christine, if I can come to you first on this. I mean, when we've seen innovations using sort of artificial intelligence to power down networks when they're not being used. We're starting to see innovations in the silicon level of the value chain. Where do you think the biggest successes have been so far in terms of network innovations to become more efficient? And secondly, where do you think the biggest gaps still exist?
Yeah. No, that's a great question, and I think one thing that is important that we want to mention is that we have the tools, the technology today to do something about it. We don't need to wait to the next big thing. We can start making significant impact right now. I think that one of the things, in general, some of what we're doing here, having a network, and this is a little bit of today and a little bit of the future, having a network that is open and that is virtualized all the way to layer 1 makes a difference, because now you have a lot more visibility on what is happening. For example, the level of telemetry that you can get, the data collection that you can get if you have your entire network open and virtualized, that could help you to take and helps you to know how do you need to manage your resources and how to be more effective. I would say also the silicon underpinning that, so you start first with your fully virtualized cloud native architecture, but then the silicon that you have underpinning that architecture, does it have the capabilities to enable power efficiency and better utilization again of resources. And again, I'm going to go back to mention what we launched not that long ago, maybe a month ago, our 4th generation with Intel VRAM boost, that you can double the capacity. We're able to double the capacity with even 20% reduction of power consumption with respect to previous generation. So those things, and then there is the AI and ML. I think that's going to be fundamental in the future. How do we use AI? There's some examples. There's some, and we have made some demonstration with Ericsson, in MWC, with other operators too, and how you can use AI ML to reduce to utilize your resources better, that do dynamic power management in a better, more efficient way, and bring your power consumption down.
Well, in a minute we'll get Bhushan to elaborate on that. But first, Fernando, I mean, you look at it, obviously Accenture is a consultancy that works with a number of carriers across the world. I mean, can you speak from your experience about how your clients are thinking about designing networks to be as energy efficient as possible, and what do you think goes into that?
Well, what we are seeing is a very important topic, right? So as they are trying to go through a transformation journey, that is virtualization, it comes also, how are we measuring energy? Mm-hmm. What can we do about it, right? So we are moving from having more granularity, so you are getting more data points, and that's what happens with data. Once you have more data, you start getting data fabric, combining telco data with energy data, so now you can have a roadmap. You can benchmark, you can baseline, and measure how you are moving forward, what benefits you are bringing. So these are conversations today. How can we become or create an energy management platform? And this is a telco customer who wants to have this platform. Conversation goes from all ranges. See, assessment, how are we doing today? How can we do better? How can we expose or have access to other data related to energy? Benchmark is a very important topic. And then, as Cristina mentioned, the AI ML, which goes kind of towards the operating model as part of this transformation. Why not bring AI capabilities, since now you have this data fabric that has all this data from telco, energy, benchmarking, always looking at the quality of experience, because those are the hard trade-offs you don't want to take, right? You don't want to sacrifice the user experience to be more efficient in energy. So all these things are coming together as part of this journey. And they are asking today. They are not waiting until 2040 to take action. So they are getting ready for it.
I should say, if you guys have questions in the audience, I will come to you in a few minutes. You will have a chance to ask questions to the panelists. I'm going to keep going for a bit, but think up your questions, and then we'll come to you in a bit and hopefully get those asked. Bhushan, Ericsson is absolutely a global leader in sustainability. I think you've done a phenomenal job in so many ways. And one of the things that has stood out to me is how much best practice you have been able to put out in the public domain about the impact of making certain innovations. I'm curious from your perspective of when Ericsson thinks about making mobile networks more energy efficient, how much of that comes from the push that you make versus the demand pull from your operator customers to become more efficient?
So, I mean, I think that's a really good question, and I think it's both push and a pull, right? So some of it goes back to fundamentally who, as a company, we are. So Ericsson has been, to your point, been a leader in sustainability for about 25 years. Our first sustainability report came out in the 90s, which is just mind-boggling when you think about that, right? So this has always been in the DNA for Ericsson, right? Always creating products that are more energy efficient. So it's kind of part of our DNA. It's also baked into our goals. So Ericsson had set a goal to create a 5G portfolio that was 10 times more energy efficient than 4G per data transfer. So last year we achieved that objective. So it's a driver for us within. But then also when we talk to our customers, we hear them say, 5G is more energy efficient, yes, but we are deploying more of it out there, right, to provide coverage, to meet the data traffic demand, and absolute power consumption is going up. So what is it that we can do beyond having boxes that are more efficient, that is a bit of a holistic approach that will allow us to kind of tackle this increasing curve of energy consumption going up? And that's kind of been the focus for us, as to how do you develop this unique approach that can help operators break the energy curve. And we talked about some of the stats that we're showing about 5G, and I think we should recognize the good work that we have done as an industry, right? Like, I mean, if you look at, I was reading some data, last 10 years, about 2011 to 2021, mobile data traffic went up 300x. 300x it went up, and then mobile network energy consumption only went up 1.6x. So you don't get these results without designing for efficiency, right? So that's kind of the impactful thing that we're talking about. But we can't stop here, right? We got to keep working. And those are some of the innovations that are going to come. We have done a lot around, I could keep going, but we've done a lot about, like, how do we reduce the embodied carbon footprint of products? Because when you talk about net zero is not just your operations. It's also this whole circular economy thing that comes into play. So how do you make products like multiband radios? So one unit doing the work of 4, you shrink the physical footprint down, and when you shrink it down, you reduce all of the emissions that come with manufacturing, transportation. So it's an add-on effect that happens. So it's both an inward push, but it's also an outward pull, from our customers.
It's incredible that you put out a sustainability report in the 90s. I mean, that alone tells the story. No, well, the company did, though. Christina, can I ask the same question to you, actually? I mean, I'm really interested, like, from Intel's perspective, when you are pushing the envelope and really driving at energy efficiencies and reform in how networks are run, how much of that is driven internally within the Intel culture compared to sort of being pushed by your customers to do that?
Oh, absolutely. This is both. Everybody's on this, right? We certainly very committed internally to drive our roadmap and our innovations and our technologies toward a more sustainable world. But also, absolutely, the customers. I would say the sustainability is at the top in the mind of all the operators, pretty much every operator in the world, and also in our customers, more direct customers, teams, and just the technical world. The thing is that this is going to happen with a collaboration. Nobody can do this alone, right? So there has to be a collaboration. There has to be technology innovation where they are driven by a push and a pull. there has to be a stakeholders kind of agreement, right, commitment from everybody that is a stakeholder. We all need to be committed to that. There has to be some strategic planning across the industry, how we're going to do this, how we're going to benchmark ourselves, how we're going to adjust the strategy if things are not working, but all together. And then there's going to be the regulatory portion of it, right? There has to be the regulatory bodies helping us achieve this.
I want to come back to measurement. That's on the list of questions I've got, and we will come back to that. But does anybody have any questions in the audience at this point you would like to ask? If you do, please raise your hand, and you can just shout it out, and I'll repeat it if people can't hear you. If you don't, you can sort up, and we can come later. Any questions? No? Okay. We'll keep going then. Let's come to the impact of measurement then, because we have run a study now for 3 years tracking the overall progress on energy efficiency across the whole telecoms industry. And we've been fortunate enough to have quite a lot of operators join that effort who provide us data on an anonymized basis that we then track over time. And to your point, Bhushan, the industry is becoming more efficient, and that's a good news story. Equally, I think there's still a lot of room for improvement in different areas. Fernando, maybe we can start with you on this. I mean, what is the best way of tracking progress here, and how do people get to grips with all the reporting frameworks of SBT, race to zero, all these things? How should we think about that and coalescing?
Yeah, I think that the answer to that is more around you need a framework, you need to bring those KPIs, you need to bring awareness. And I was discussing with Bhushan earlier, remember back in the days the concern was drop call rate. And you're looking at drop call rate, that user doesn't experience drop call rates anymore. So that's out of the picture. You still measure it, but you don't experience it. Same thing happens with latency, accessibility. So now it's all about throughput, data latency. So now having energy as a KPI on the C-suite, they are concerned about how is my energy consumption. And that's something we've been working with the Next Generation Mobile Network Alliance to create that framework. So that gives you a starting point. You have a reference, and once you start keeping focus on a topic, you will do whatever to make it better. And even the framework itself it was published at the beginning of this year. It's a baseline that it will be reviewed and it will evolve as well. It's not a final framework. It will evolve with the technology. So I think that will be a great thing to do, right? The same way we're doing benchmarking of performance, start adding the energy component to it. So CSPs, they will use that to say, I'm greener than you. So now the green KPIs will become relevant.
Yeah.
And it will help, to push the whole industry to improve it and make it even better.
Bhushan, do you want to build on that?
Yeah, so I think the way to build on it is, I think maybe to what you were saying, it's time to redefine what we think about as the best network, right? The best network used to be about performance. That's what we talk about, right? But the best network of the future is going to be, of course, high performing, it's going to be energy efficient, and it's going to be sustainable. So those are the three metrics by which the best networks of the future will be measured and marketed. So I feel like that's the kind of way that we should look at this. I think to your question about benchmarking, I think there's kind of two levels in my mind from a benchmarking point of view. One is kind of the reporting side, right? You talked about the Science-Based Targets Initiative, the Net Zero, Race to Zero. There's so many of these initiatives that are out there. I have been seeing a lot more consolidation happening slowly, which is a good thing because there's only so many ways you can report the same data sets. So that's one. But I think the other one is also operational benchmarking, right? And at the end of the day, you can't really manage what you can't measure. So you need to have the ability in networks to be able to go down at a very granular level and measure actual energy performance. So with Ericsson, what we're doing is that with 4G and 5G, we have actually put energy data counters that can measure actual energy consumption at all RAN functions and at all nodes. So once you have this data at this level, now you can decide what's the right energy management strategy to deploy for which site, right? So for a high capacity site, it may make sense to modernize quickly. You get the biggest bang for the buck, most energy efficient products. For sites that are low capacity, maybe you start with enabling sleep mode functionality more efficiently. So it really comes down to having data and being able to leverage that data. And then, everybody uses the buzzword now, AI and machine learning, but it is true. It is a buzzword, but it's a real thing, right? When networks becoming more and more complex, you need to have these tools to be able to orchestrate them, more dynamically based on the traffic patterns and the variations. So there's a lot that can be done, but that's kind of the trend that I see at least going forward.
I'll say one more thing. I think I totally agree with you guys. Have a fantastic coverage. The other thing that I would say is we have to have certain way to harmonize how we're measuring, right? Because if you have a report that measures in a certain way and somebody else measures in some other way, then we don't know what we're comparing, we don't know what is working. So having across the industry that collaboration that tell us how the measure is happening, how it should happen, and help us understand the data that the data needs to have a clear meaning when it comes back to us.
It's interesting you bring that up, the sort of harmonization. Like, let's just stick with that for a minute. So Intel interfaces with so many companies and parts of the value chain, so many. Do you think it's realistic to get to a limited set of reporting KPIs on energy that, say, Intel and its partners would use and sort of jointly report on? Or do you think it's, in a way, everybody will always have their own sort of ways of tracking progress?
I think that depends. As you said, we interface and we have multiple partners in different areas. So different areas might have different ways to make sense to the data. Not everybody necessarily have to have the same KPIs. But I think by maybe industry, by a specific functionality, by where the function is happening in the network or where the equipment is in the network, I think there has to be some ways to make sense of that. It doesn't have to be one for the entire, in our case, it's too many people. It's such a rich ecosystem. Maybe not one fit all, but it has to be a way to make sense between similar kind of data collection.
We had, I think one of the interesting comments from the keynote from Lenovo and AMD was that now management and sort of executive officers are being comped on sustainability targets. That to me is a really kind of telling point. Do you think that is going to continue? And by extension, how much of reporting on green progress to the investor community is going to be an important driver of change?
Absolutely. There is no other way forward. You are measuring now, so you want to monetize on it as well. And you want to differentiate yourself from the others. How I'm better. You don't need to have the highest speed anymore. You are the most efficient company, right? So, and adding to the benchmarking, that's why the framework is built, and it covers scopes 1, 2, and 3. And what we are seeing there is scope 1 and 2 is more in control of the CSPs. When we talk about scope 3, that's the challenge, because it's way too big to manage and to control. So we are working on that, creating the different levers, and we have over 150 levers that can make you be good at that. So it's almost part of defining that roadmap and how do they have to move forward. But back to your question, that's clearly the path forward.
Bhushan, would you agree with that? Or do you want to add in anything? And just
turn the microphone on.
Let's assume we all do agree with that.
Yes.
How does that story get told to investors, and how does that evolve? Let's put it that way.
So I think one of the most interesting things that's happened is that sustainability has gone from a cost center to a profit center. So it's made that shift. So now what you're thinking about is how can Ericsson be recognized as the most competitive, sustainable company by all of the telco customers that we work with. So once you have that shift, then it becomes important to have compensation aligned with it, right? So it's something that gets optimized. I think when you think about investors, I feel like investors are looking at it in two different ways. One is that they're looking at climate risk within their portfolio and saying, what is it that's happening, or what can I do to not eliminate, but minimize the climate risks that exist in my portfolio. So that's one way of telling the story. There's a lot of work that's going on with like the Carbon Disclosure Project that is very, very focused on investors. It's investors coming to companies saying, tell us what you're doing to minimize your climate risk, what opportunities do you see, what programs are you deploying, and it's designed in a way that you can do cross-comparison, similar to how you would compare a balance sheet. So those things are already happening. And you know, so I mean, it's just going to keep going on, right? It's going to get more defined and more refined. The one, I'm going to make a shameless plug. So one of the things that I'm also working on is the NextG Alliance. So NextG Alliance has a Green G working group, which I chair. And what we're doing is we're trying to answer this exact question. What sort of KPIs exist out there that we can identify that can be used to report progress against energy efficiency and sustainability? And it's not easy. It's a lot of hard work, and some KPIs will not change, right? So energy per data transfer, probably that's going to be a KPI that's going to exist. But what's going to change is how those KPIs are disclosed. You know, are those KPIs going to be transparently reported? Are they going to be observable? Can we use them to allow customers to make choices based on them? So those are the things that I think are going to change going forward.
Christina, do you want to talk about how Intel messages out and how you think this story will change in terms of talking to your investors and telling the story of how you are becoming more sustainable and how you're helping your partners become more sustainable?
Yeah, no, it is, again, right, this is sustainability for Intel is very important. It's a priority, it's at the forefront. We have very specific goals where we want to get to, and that we're doing really well toward that. You know, this when you talk about Intel, there are multiple things. How do we work, for example, with the PCs? It's beyond the networking and the telco industry. How do we work with the PC manufacturing to make more energy efficient the PC? How do we work with our partners in the data centers and the cloud companies to also have a more sustainable, better carbon print? When you talk then about the networking again, how do we build equipments that are more sustainable? What can we do? What kind of capabilities can we have in our roadmap, in our silicon, to help reach that goal? And then in addition to that is the leadership in the, you know, with the standard bodies, with you know, in general with regulatory bodies. How do we continue pushing that forward and moving that forward? And because again, this is such a industry work, industry-wide, global-wide work, we have an opportunity. We have a really rich ecosystem, so we have an opportunity to reach wide and work with every single partner. Every conversation we have, every partnership that we have sustainability in mind.
Tim, can I add one more thing on the investor
Please.
side? And you know, just kind of plugging in our friends over at Verizon, right? So they have issued 4 $1 billion green bonds. And so they've gone out to the market and said, we want to invest in sustainability, and every single issue has been oversubscribed. And that bond raised has been focused on investing in renewable energy, in sustainability. So there's a lot of appetite out there within the market for investing in sustainability. So I just kind of wanted to point that out as something that's very near here.
No, it's a good shout. We're seeing a lot of green raisings in Europe as well. Telefonica and others who have had oversubscribed issues as well. And I think that speaks to the broader trend that we've been talking about of investors now prioritizing this in their portfolio. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. in this panel. I've got another question, but does anybody have any questions that they want to raise? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. My name is Katayun Ektadar, and I'm the founder of GSS Think. We specialize, we specialize in, my name is Katayun Ektadar. I am the founder of an organization called GSS Think. We advise government sovereign wealth funds and asset managers on their compliance and actual strategy, sustainable strategy, intertwined with their portfolio, because it's quite substantial, and a lot of them have portfolios within the space where all of you work and are doing really wonderful things. So one of the issues has been that the telecom, for lack of better terms, or mobile industry, has been you're talking about energy efficiency and sustainability, but there's been so much focus about energy and energy. You have to keep in mind, sustainability is not just energy. So, for example, TCFD, right? Task Force on Financial Disclosures, which is a necessity you have to actually file with your 10K. It's talk about physical risk, actually, where your locality is based on geospatial info. Nobody's talking about, I'm saying in general, right? Because obviously within your industry that's important. And also the S, the social. What is it that's being done? And I do not hear that at all, right? So we specialize on mitigation of the risk of compliance through AI, and as well as prediction on the impact. This is what our organization does. Okay, and on the PPPs. Thank you.
No, and it's a good question. I think we can. I'll give these guys a chance to respond to that. I think part of that is that the whole ESG discussion would take a long time to have up here, and we only had half an hour. But Christina, do you want to speak to some of the social side of ESG to this lady's question?
It's what you're saying. We could be talking forever about this. It covers so many things. The things, for example, very close to me, what we're doing with water utilization, for example, that's that's a big part of it, and an important focus on what we're doing in our manufacturing facilities. So yes, it covers everything. We're talking here about the power consumption because it's such a big number in the networking and especially in the radio access, but it should be holistic. When we look, and I think the point here is when you look at sustainability, you have to look at it with a holistic approach. It's just, you cannot just fine-tune one and forget about the other one, or fix one and forget about the other. You have to look about a complete, holistic approach of what can be done and where do you need, all the places where you need to focus on.
It's a good way to end the discussion because I think this does bring us out to the broader level, but I'll give you guys each a chance. Bhushan, do you want to give your thoughts on it?
Yeah, so I was just going to say thank you for asking that question. We do focus so much on energy, but then also waste, recycling. All of these issues are very material and important. Right. They are. And it's not that energy is the only focus. There's a lot of other things that are happening too, with like product end of life. Ericsson has had a product take back program forever. Everything that we take back through that program, 98% of it gets recycled, reused, repurposed. Only 2% of that goes to the landfill. So that's some amazing numbers that we're able to drive. Also on waste and packaging, right? We're starting to do trials now to have plastic-free packaging. So that's also being worked on. On the social side, there's a lot of work going on in bridging the digital divide. We're working on this project where we're doing mapping all the schools around the world. So just pointing out and mapping schools, the next step then is to see if they're connected, and then working within the industry to connect them, right? So those are kind of steps that are happening. So absolutely, it's an ESG focus, and I think the others maybe don't get as much focus, but they should.
Fernando, do you want to wrap us up on this one?
Sure thing. Yeah, I totally agree. This is an all in one package. And I will say on top of it that us are the companies who we practice what we preach. So we are first doing that internally, and then we go out to show and help others do. So I think that's a common denominator for all of us, right? It's not just talking about things, it's let's do it first in-house, see how it works, and then go help others do it as well.
Yeah. I think what we'll have to do is, if these guys can make themselves available after. Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I'm sure they'd be happy to talk in more detail. We've got to get to the next panel, which is going to be another great panel. But guys, we could talk all afternoon about this. And if my team is telling me I need to move on here, so I'll get a slap on the wrist if we keep going too much. But thank you so much, all of you. It was really, really great discussion. We will no doubt be having this one for a long time to come. So please join me in thanking this panel. Stephen Rose from IBM. There he is. How you doing?
Hey.
Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
And our dynamic duo that was already up on the stage before, Dominique. How are you? John, how you doing?
Great.
Grab a seat. No, it is great to have you guys up. Thanks so much for joining us, and the presentation at the top of the summit was really good fodder for this. I mean, we've talked about sustainability at a high level, why people are moving in that direction, the demand reasons for that, some of the supply side reasons for it. I think the panel just now was really interesting to look at some of the radio access and the network level innovations we're seeing in telecom. What would be good to do in this panel, though, is kind of dive down, into the cloud and look at and other parts of the value chain, not just at the radio network level, to understand as this whole kind of enterprise digitization movement takes hold and different industries go through that process, how we think about the sustainability implications. And that's, I guess, the premise for this discussion, and looking at the cloud, looking at the edge, looking at the energy dynamics between that sort of thing. So that's where we're going to go with it. Again, I think people are kind of coming in and out between different panels. So if you do have questions, we'll come to you in due course. So just bear that in mind, and we'll aim to get to that. Stephen, you haven't had a chance to speak yet, so let's come to you first. IBM's a global company. Huge presence in almost every country in the world. I mean, maybe starting at a high level for you, when you were talking with your clients, how are you thinking about the sustainability transition, and what are your sort of top priorities?
Yeah. So, first and foremost, I mean, it's basic table stakes nowadays. Yeah. If you're not talking to sustainability, if you're not actually able to discuss what it is that you do to contribute to sustainability as a basic table stake within your business, even as something as the way in which you pitch your service, or the way in which any one of our clients are going to their enterprise clients. So if it's a CSP going to an enterprise, they have to be able to talk to what it is that they do to contribute to ESG concerns. Yeah. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing, in terms of cloud infrastructure, I think there are two concerns. One is which is driving that. One is just the cost of capital and the cost of OPEX right now. I mean, it's obviously there's inflation that has been a serious problem that they're having to combat, and then the second concern that they have is just the unit cost of energy, those types of things. So what is it that they're doing? First off, they're trying to make sure that they understand do they have transparency to the cost? That's a major issue for a lot of our customers. They're running multiple clouds. Those multiple clouds are being contracted through many different vendors, and they want to be able to understand, do I actually understand where those workloads are? To what extent am I actually getting the maximum use out of that particular cloud array? And the second element is, if I want to dynamically move workloads between those different clouds. Am I able to do that? Because that actually contributes significantly to sustainability. Yeah, if I've got a core that's running on a low utilization, am I able to then to move a workload across, and then am I able to do so without actually interrupting or disrupting the service chain? So actually it's got to be a seamless way of doing it. So there are a number of factors that contribute to ESG, but for us it really starts with observability, transparency, and then the ability to dynamically shift workloads relative to either performance demand or a lack of demand.
We'll come back to that because I do want to talk about some of the innovations in data centers and the edge to help mitigate rising, traffic levels and energy consumptions. But let's just go on. So, Dominique, maybe we can come to you next. I mean, again, global company. You guys had a great presentation to talk about the partnership, and we can go into more detail on that. But just at a top level, and almost a question I asked in the previous panel, like, how recently has sustainability for Lenovo become a key priority, and how has that been led from the front, from the top down, as such?
Yeah, it's a good one, Tim. I would say the sustainability itself came a couple of years, probably 4 years ago, when it really started. I think our ESG reporting is probably on its 4th version already. So we have a structure like our global organization. We have an ESG-focused type of organization that really looks at everything that we can do. On the previous panel presentation that I had the pleasure to do with John, we showed a couple of elements of innovation and things we do, but there's more. In fact, obviously large company, different business groups, they all have goals into improving there. But I think what's really new, and I follow you, Stephen, is really the customers are putting that really front and forward. And that's really a change. So if I look back beginning of this year when we were planning the year and looking at the changes and some of the customer questions that we may get this year and the top of mind things, I tell you that sustainability was probably somewhere in the top 10, but not really up there, number 1 or number 2. So I think what's changed really is in fact a customer pressure to us. What are you doing? I was sharing this anecdote about this presentation, product presentation, to technical people, really technical people, and their first question, was, what's the scope 1, 2, and 3 impact of your product, right? You go like, wait a minute, I'm here to talk about speeds and feeds and features and all of that, right? Second, what's consumption? What's the power draw that you have from that product? Yeah, before we even get to the product itself. And that's just an anecdote, but it comes, very systematically. I would follow what GSMA has mentioned about, 85% of the customer have sustainability as priority 1. The feedback we get from our sales, that's top of mind. So it's probably the same ratio, 8 out of 10. So I think that's the big change for us. Is yes, we're doing this because we put science-based targets in there. We have a plan to go to net zero. There's a lot of initiatives going through the organization, R&D, engineering, supply chain, changing mentality and so forth. But it's really the customer feedback and the pressure coming back to us.
John, I want to put the same question to you. I mean, huge global company, many clients. I mean, talk about the leadership pivot here from your management and how you see that kind of changing in the culture.
Well, the last presentation we made, I think all along AMD is tried to be compliant. I was talking to this young lady right down here. I remember when I was on the client side of our business, this has probably been 10, 15 years ago, there were regulations that said we needed to remove lead as an element out of our microprocessors. And so, that's 15 years ago. So, there was definitely, a corporate effort to do that. And I think that, where things were, we've flipped the switch, and I'll come to the flip in a minute, but there's always been kind of, some level of regulations that we have complied with and I think that all started in kind of in the manufacturability of the side of our business, and it wasn't necessarily public because ESG has become very public in the last 4 or 5 years. So, there was, before that light switch, we were doing the things necessary. As I talked about, and again, we're in Austin, Texas, so, a little more sensitive to the environment, which is always a good thing. When I moved, I lived in Houston for many years, and when they would build houses, if there was and they needed to put a sidewalk in your, along your front yard, they would just mow down the tree and put the sidewalk down. And I contrast that to when I moved to Austin 21 years ago. The sidewalk, there's a tree. We're going to make the sidewalk come around. We're going to go around the tree. So it's the environment. And Austin's a very outdoor environment, very sensitive to sustainability. So when we built our campus in 2007, as I said before, we built the roofs so they're like this. They capture all the rainwater, and we recycle all of that water. We did, I don't remember the LED certifications at the time, things like that. So there's been moments of times of sensitivity. When the ESG light switch flipped, it actually complemented our story and intersected really well with our story, with where we are in terms of the design and manufacturing of our microprocessors, because we're trying to give companies the performance to digest all of this information and turn it into an actionable intelligence, but we're trying to do it in a way that's differentiated from our competition. And that means we started looking at higher power, or higher performance for less power. And so that kind of strategy really intersected well with ESG. And as I said before, more and more C-level officers are now being bonused by their sustainability initiative. So it's all just kind of intersected really well for us.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a groundswell of activity there. Stephen, let's come back to the cloud discussion. So, we've run some analysis, and other organizations have as well. I think it came up on a previous slide where if you look at the share of power usage across the world, telco access networks take about 1% of that, and data centers take about 1% as well. A little bit more, give or take. That is what it is, but if you look, let's say net zero is 2050. To get there, you've got to reduce emissions 50% in each of the next 3 decades. So for the cloud, whether you are AWS, whether you are Microsoft or Google or whoever, is it possible to get that 1% down to have data centers occupying a lower share of global electricity usage? And if so, how, from your perspective, how does that happen? What are the things that are needing to happen to bring data center efficiency, improved?
No, are we going to get there? Well, I think that the question is, I can't necessarily answer. Will we actually get there? I don't have the answer for that. But what I do think about is, how do we make sure that there is sufficient inward and outward pressure from the ecosystem within us? So if you look at the telco ecosystem today, if I was a CSP today, I would be issuing RFQs with ESG front and center to the RFQ. It would actually, spell out, can you actually show me your plan? Can you show me the pathway to net zero? And I think if we don't actually have that as a central tenet to the ordinary ways of working, whether it be in our design of our products or our services, or whether it is the way that we issue RFQs to each other, I think that's going to be a big problem. So the answer, actually, a lot of the answer starts there. The good news is that the ecosystem takes this very seriously. And again, if I look to, there are certain organizations that I just find enormously impressive in terms of the leadership commitment to ESG. TELUS in Canada, fantastic example, led by the chief operating officer there, Tony Guerin. He lives and breathes this every single day. It isn't a complementary, sort of side by the side, decision he makes. He talks about this in every aspect of his work, whether it be how it affects communities or how they invest their money or whatever it is. And actually, if you look at the way they even invest their money and they put that money back into different communities to drive ESG and DEI initiatives, it's really, really impressive. So I think it's a leadership commitment. It's a way in which we actually organize ourselves in terms of a community, the way that we issue RFQs, and then we must agree what are the KPIs that we would run to as an organization, because you can't put it all on one part of the ecosystem. Yeah, you have to make sure that everybody in the different parts of the ecosystem are aligned to a particular outcome. So I mean, but again, I think we're making strong progress in those domains.
Yeah. No, and it's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, to use the cliche, John, from AMD's perspective, sticking with the data center question, because so much of the world's processing power is moving to the cloud, if it hasn't already. Where do you think the biggest improvements can be made there in terms of how we think about the data center of the future, and how much of that do you see in your day-to-day job in terms of working with partners to help drive that down, drive efficiencies, to an improved level?
Yeah, I mean, yes, a lot of the processing power is in the cloud, but there's still, half the market or more is still sitting on-prem, and where that's going, there's still a lot of on-prem business. I think I'm going to go off what you said. I think that there's the economics are driving the pressure, and you see that pressure in certain countries and regions more so. I mean, we've seen it more in Europe lately because of the cost of power, and so. I think that the ecosystem is going to continue to innovate because we all need one another. Because whether it's a microprocessor, it's a server from Lenovo, it's a software from IBM, the networking. I mean, we're all interdependent on one another. So that pressure is going to continue to drive. I think. Intentional and unintentional, very intentional, but also when I say unintentional, I mean each individual companies, they're still going to do some things on their own, but it's that's what's going to continue to drive the force of that efficiency. And I think as things move more towards the edge, and we can push that compute towards the edge, I think that's going to drive another level of efficiency as well.
We're going to be releasing some research later this week on the edge, and one of the things, really the dynamics between data traffic being processed at the edge versus the cloud, and what the energy implications of that are. And without kind of pre-releasing it too much, there was a survey of operators we ran, and essentially we asked, how do you expect your traffic patterns to change? And the clear finding was we expect both the edge and the cloud to soak up an additional level of capacity because our customers want both. So it's not one or other. Dominique, when you're talking about the server business and your customers, how are they thinking about driving energy efficiency improvements at the edge, and where do you think the biggest things that still need to happen are?
It's a good one. I think we're not constrained first by technology. There's enough technology out there, either from us or from different partner, to really improve the footprint of a data center. And when I'm thinking data center, I'm not only thinking the core data center, but to your point about edge and regional sites, I consider those also data center, right? We have this monolithic view about a data center. We have rows and rows and rows of server, and that's consuming like a mini town type of power drain. But in fairness, the more we go to the edge, we're going to have the same problem again. So there was an interesting also results from Uptime, who measures the power efficiency of data center. And in fact, the PUE of data center has basically dropped a little bit. Back to your question about, is this dropping significantly in the next 10 years or so for multiple decades? But the history shows that in fact that PUE efficiency has not been really declining, has been really marginally going down a little bit. So there's I think gains to be done on the data center itself, on the PUE of data center as such. And then if you of course move that in for more regional or on the far edge, you still will have consumption and power drain there. So yes, it's going to be interesting to have compute closer to where the data is being generated and only backhaul what you really need. I think there was certainly some gains to be there. You don't need to build more data center before itself. So I think that will certainly help as a second factor. But the third factor for me is, I think there's a collision course, like two freight trains that will hit each other. I don't think we're there yet, but there's two freight trains from going to be face to face and hitting in front of. First, big companies wants to really go for the net zero and achieve those targets. 40% of the telco last year missed their environmental target. So 4 out of 10 just missed their target. So they set a goal, first year, second year, maybe third year in a row, they just missed the target. They can't do that. Boards will not accept, shareholders will not accept that. Everybody around in the organization will never accept that. So that's one force hitting. But at the same time, from the technical people, the product is just consuming more and more. So yes, we do, in the cloud. Yes, we have to repatriate all of those workloads sometimes on-prem. But the fact is, in the last several years, the CPU consumption has gone through the roof. I think average power for a CPU tripled in the last 4 years. So we talk about AI and accelerator, but the accelerator is probably consuming more power than CPU these days. And it's probably a factor 8 in the last 4 years. So if you decompose everything that's running in a data center, you just see like everything is going up. So even if it's a big core data center or a regional data center, that drain is just going up and up and up and up. So you got these two forces, these two big trains coming up in the organizations where, wait a minute, I got to achieve my net zero, find a way, but I can't, because I need more power, I need more CPU, I need more GPU. Even if I put it on the edge, right, I'm going to put some accelerator on the edge because I need to treat my data. I need to run machine learning at the far edge. So that's still having that. So these two forces will hit each other. So I think as an organization, as an industry, really, we need to find a way to go around that and find new ways, right? So if you factor in that data center has historically never really improved, that technology rise and that pressure from the boards, I think we're going to have something very interesting in the next 2 years.
I will continue with the questioning, but as with the previous panel, is just to turn it to the audience. Are there any questions you guys would like to ask? Does anybody have any questions you want to ask at this point? If not, that is just fine. We can come back. Okay, well, let's keep going. So we got about 10 minutes left, thereabout. Stephen, coming back to IBM, I mean, you touched on AI at the start. Let's, without going into too much detail, where do you think we can make better use of automation and AI in this discussion, and where can that benefit that we haven't yet seen it, do you think?
Yeah, again, I think it starts with just understanding, first off, an architectural choice you make. You have to decide now that we're going to move. If we go into to the point that was just made, if the services that are being rendered are actually going to put more demand, then you have to actually ensure that you can operate to the lowest TCO and within a cloud array that actually enables you to move dynamically between edge, metro cloud or whatever other cloud is, further and further back. So the only way you're going to know that is actually if you're able to dynamically move those without human intervention. So you've got to use, and you don't necessarily need to have generative AI, but you do need to use traditional AI to figure out where are the alarms coming in, how to correlate the alarms, or how to correlate the different, instantiate and provision the different types of services, and how to do that dynamically within any given context, within any given moment. Yeah, and of course you have to be able to do that at the different clouds, whether it be edge or whatever it happens to be, because you will see that the different types of experience will be driving different types of demand on any type of cloud at any given moment. So I think there's a lot of automation and orchestration. Where I really see the opportunity, though, is also trying to make sure that you're not burning cycles on wasted time between players within the ecosystem. The more integrated that we can work between hybrid cloud vendors and chipset vendors, for example, the more we can work between CSPs and OEMs, the more integrated those systems are and those working processes, the more you can catch problems or the more you can provision dynamically. That'll enable you to use the different types of cloud arrays much more dynamically, and that's where you get the lowest TCO. The other one, of course, is neutral host players have a huge role to play in this environment as well. they can actually look to encouraging much more stronger ways of co-opetition, not just at the physical infrastructure layer, but we might be able to then transform in the way in which these tower sites are actually then used in a much more cooperative way. So I do think there are multiple options for us, but fundamental architectural choices, and then inserting observability and automation right at the beginning of a service design is what's going to help you get the lowest ESG impacts.
Yeah,
highest, whichever way you want to see it.
Yeah. No, it's interesting you bring up the neutral host and the Tower Co point. We've got one sort of fireside panel after this, which we're going to get into that. So it's a good point. You touched on something, and just coming back to you guys and your presentation previous to this, where you talked about the partnership. I'm interested to know, and you can each answer this, but how, in forming that partnership, how did you lay out the goals together of what that was going to be, and how easy or difficult was that for you?
I'm going to let you start.
I think the general idea was easy. I think making it happen was really tough. Sometimes you start a journey, you know where you want to go.
Yeah.
But the road to get there is probably very bumpy, twisty, up and down. Maybe you fall on a trap, and then you kind of get there. I think along the way, innovation prevails and we find ways. So I think human nature, I'm a true believer in human nature for that. Human nature will find a way. Nature finds a way. And I agree with you, Stephen. I think it's only by working together then, in fact, you get new ideas. And even within the company, we have basically regrouped the teams working on telco and 5G in particular, because the people working on Motorola handsets may have some very different perspective on 5G and what 5G consumption may be. And the same thing for all the divisions we have. So there's a lot of that dimension of creativity coming from different angle that you can really stimulate. So I think along the way there was an interesting path. We released together exactly a year ago Neptune, which is our water cooling technology. Back to the point that what can we do in practice? That's 40% reduction straight like this of power envelope, just like that, bang. But we brought that in fact in general purpose server. So something that you would believe is coming off the shelf, we call it COTS server, right, these days, or probably since a few years. But putting very advanced technology like water cooling, on a plain server was something I think very cool.
Yeah, very cool.
Joke aside, and pun intended. But bringing that with a partner and thinking how that impacts CPU design, die on set, how we can make the socket work on the motherboard, making sure we have room enough on the hardware. I'm going technical here, but just to show you that there's things that we can do together, I think collaboratively. And to Stephen's point, the more we are together, the more diverse we are together, it's getting better. Internally, I used to say all the time that my scope 1 is the customer's scope 2 and 3, right? And vice versa. Maybe your scope 2 is my scope 3, something along those lines. And that realization needs to happen, and then that innovation will start to kick in. So once you have that frame in mind and people talking the same language, certainly connecting the scopes together, all of a sudden that innovation and the human nature will kick in, and I'm sure we're going to find solutions.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, I think there's an interesting intersection between what the market needs, and so I always kind of call it the outside in. So there's requirements from the market, and the workloads are diversifying. They have been diversifying. So you talked about the Neptune product. That's a high performance. Need the best performance possible. That's like the number one priority, and so we have a product for that. It's a design point, right? And then you can bring in requirements like we've been talking about ESG today. I mean, that's become more of a requirement. And so you got to think about that in terms of that requirement, other requirements you have, the prioritization of those requirements. And, so the product that we talked about today, the Think Edge product, that's a design. Those are design points. And then you've got brilliant people, whether they're sitting at IBM or AMD or Lenovo, that are thinking about things and that are 4 or 5 years from now that none of us are thinking about. And it's that intersection of inside out, outside in, and it comes together in products. And I think that because AMD has been one of our innovations is that with our technology now, and I'm going to oversimplify it from the non-technical guy that I am, but it's chiplet technology, but think Legos. So we can design chiplets with the ability to process information, but we can build these chiplets based on these different differentiating requirements, differentiating workloads, and put them together in a manufacture them. And I want to say it's manufacturing silicon's easy, because it's not. It is real. It's rocket science. But the manufacturability of building these different, using different blocks of IP to solve for these different requirements. We've got this flexibility now, and that's ultimately what we've been able to do with Lenovo.
Well, we've got just 2 minutes left, so one final question, and it's a simple one. Well, simple and yet, maybe not so simple. But what are you most excited about, and what do you think, if we look 5-10 years ahead, will be the biggest kind of change to what we see now in this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, we're just moving to much more ambidextrous types of networks, right? I mean, you're able to dynamically move workloads, you're able to dynamically serve customers, and most of that comes through a very, very strong model of co-opetition that exists in the industry. I was saying this to the GSMA board last Friday when I was presenting to the strategy board. There is no industry that I know of, perhaps the banking community is somewhat close to it, that has an interworking co-opetition model or cooperation between a massive ecosystem than the telco industry. So if we're going to solve problems that actually of this kind of magnitude, and they are grand challenges to say the least, we will actually not only be able to solve them for ourselves, but I think we'll set the example to many other industries. So I genuinely think we're on the right path for that. We just need to mature the ways of working and be more willing to actually work in collaborative labs and simple pragmatic things that enable us to progress some of the innovation work.
Does that resonate with you, John?
Yeah, it does. I when you asked that question, I guess what I was thinking about was really the continued democratization of information technology, and the ability, and that drives innovation. I mean, I think about AI, and we're just starting down this road, but the tools that are being made available, already, and allowing everyday people to harness that kind of power and information in a way where it doesn't require a degree in computer science or a PhD. That's what excites me, because I think that's what's going to continue to drive innovation.
Dom, last word to you.
Yeah. Well, when I'm getting older, I like to be put in a time capsule. Because think of it this way, right? Banking was invented, like 3-4 centuries ago. Paper money was invented maybe 2,000 years ago. But the telecom industry and the IT industry was really something 110 years ago. And so I really wonder how we're going to see this industry evolve in 100 years from now. Think of it, what happened the last 20 years, 50 years in this industry. We went from nobody knew what a mobile phone was. I remember receiving my first handset. We were all carrying those big things with the big antennas and getting a phone. And then all of a sudden we could send text, which was in fact a byproduct of just network setup. And we were like, wait a minute, this is fantastic. I remember the first smartphone that I got in my hand. But then I was part of a merger and acquisition in my previous life, and then telecom operators were buying system integrators because they wanted to be in system integration. So all of a sudden they moved from wireline, wireless to system integration, and now they moved to cloud. There are several telecom operators are declaring themselves complete telcos, right? Complete EI system house. So telecom operators becoming EI system house. Who would have thought about that like 5 years ago? So I really wonder if I come out of my time capsule, in 50 years from now, what the telecom operators will be looking like, and this industry in general will be looking like. Yeah.
Well, on that note, we will wrap it up. Guys, thank you very much for that great discussion. We do have one more panel starting now, which is going to be on renewables and energy and circularity. So please do stick around for that. And then our final keynote at 4:30. But guys, thank you very much for joining. It was a real pleasure. We talked a lot about networks and cloud and edge and infrastructure. To round out the discussion, we wanted to bring it more to sort of the energy discussion of operating new models of energy access, renewables, and circularity. And we got about 20 minutes, and it's just three of us, so I think we can get through a decent amount there. But maybe, Alex, if I can start with you. I mean, your company's got such an interesting story. When you think about this question of helping companies get their emissions down and transitioning to renewables, do you want to just tell people a little about how you do that, first of all, and how you've seen the environment change in the last 2 or 3 years?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so first off, thank you for having me here. It's always nice to be on the same stage with you. So when we work with our customers, typically we provide distributed renewable energy for telecommunication infrastructure, and that includes towers, monopoles, access points for fiber. That includes anything that consumes power across the entire network. And typically, we take a very consultative approach to their network. We look at demand first, then we look at traffic patterns, then we look at the solar radiation coefficients within the space, so that we always get input on accessibility of renewable energy. We also focus on the demand side, first off, on how to implement energy efficiency before we decide to come up with a solution. And then we take a holistic network approach. Kavan develops, designs, and manufactures energy storage systems for sites that are off-grid, on-grid, sites that require grid isolation, peak shifting, peak shaving, anything that has to do with sort of reducing the amount of power that we're consuming from the grid. And so when we work with our customers, we typically help them decide what product makes sense depending on the environmental conditions, because renewable energies are very tied to what the behavior of that location is, whether it's you have very good solar radiation coefficients, whether or not you have a utility company that may have very dynamic load time of use tariffs, and then that's how we suggest what they should tackle. So, for example, we provide power. We operate in about 16 countries today, including the U.S. In some of the operators that we currently service include carriers in the Caribbean. In the Caribbean, the cost of power is extremely high. It's very carbon intense. Typically, the grid consumes its power, or it obtains its power from either carbon sources or gas sources, and so. In that specific example, we try to isolate the sites completely from the grid as much as possible, so as to reduce scope 2 of what you just talked about with the previous panel. And then in other applications, like in Southern California, we have more dynamic uses of the grid where we might recommend that we do partial solar, and then we completely isolate the site from the grid during peak hours. So it depends on the location of the customer.
Just one quick follow-up, and then Jason, I will come to you after. When you look in the markets you're operating in now, what are what level of renewables supply exists, and how much of a bottleneck is that to people sort of accessing that type of power?
not enough is the answer. So again, the two previous panels, we talked about scope 1 and scope 2, and I think, right now we're talking about how. Okay, we talked about all of these great things that we're trying to measure and these great things that we're trying to implement, and now it's when, okay, how do we actually properly implement that? How do we scope the solution so that you get a very good return on investment or a very comparable IRR on projects. And so I think if we're talking about off-premise renewable generation, it depends on where you're located, but what we do is on-site renewable generation and storage. We are less than 0.5% of penetration within some of our customers, and so as a business owner, that's really great because that means we have a lot of room for growth. But at the same time, we have to do this faster, and there needs to be more focus on that.
Jason, I know you are involved in many lines of work in this area, and when we talk about scope 3 emissions and that being kind of the elephant in the room and how to get that down, where do you start that discussion, and how do you think about circularity within that?
Well, the first thing is taking an asset, whether it be mobile devices, which is where I'm primarily spend most of my time, whether it's network equipment, taking an asset, figuring out what can I do with it, how much is it worth? Because at the end of the day, those are the two drivers of how you make decisions and how you redeploy, reuse, recycle, whatever that is. So we facilitate information to help make those decisions. And I think that is the big indicator of figuring it out. What can I do with it? How much is it worth? So that I can make that decision. What you don't know is what kind of hurts you in that process, where that friction is. If I didn't really know what I could do with the device, the same way that the GSMA study about devices that are dormant, if you just don't know how much the value of that device is worth and where it can be reused, people just don't take any action. And that's the same, I think, at a microeconomic decision level for a consumer, the same way that it is for an operator trying to figure out, I've got these devices or I've got this network equipment. Oh, really? I didn't know it was worth that much. How do I do that? And so I think that is our challenge. Those are things that are on the horizon for us. So remove that friction, get the information flowing better, faster, so that those decisions could be made and assets can be repurposed to achieve those objectives.
I mean, I've seen statistics showing that, only around 10 to 15% of mobile handsets are actually recycled now, and which is a really kind of pitifully low number. How do you get that number up? And how do you get that? I mean, that's even in the most advanced economies. I mean, when you look at recycling trends in other regions, how do you think you get more people to be reusing equipment?
I think one, of course, is awareness, and it has to vary by region. So if you're in an area or region where the devices and used devices, as an example, are just not that valuable, there's still some value. And again, there's always value in doing the right thing, down to a personal level. They get value out of giving. So I think it may be, for those type markets and decisions, it's not, let me take this device, I'm going to go turn it in, I'm going to get some great money, I'm going to take everyone to lunch, right? But in certain markets, it may very much be focused on that doing the right thing and the intrinsic value that they get out of so the operators can help, other stakeholders can help by simplifying that process. I've heard ideas about gamifying, making it fun to be able to turn in something. I remember a survey from many years ago from radio stations trying to check on doing their normal ratings, and they included in a survey there was a $2 into the survey, and you just felt obliged. There was no guarantee the survey was ever going to be complete, but it was just a little bit of a thank you in advance. I think I will fill out this survey and send it back. So I think there are methods to do that, and one of the areas that we're focusing on is trying to figure those out, how to figure out which markets need those types of non-traditional business value how much money is it really worth to me decisions to be effective in those markets. At the same time, in the other developed markets, it's still creating awareness and working on those operator trade-in programs so that they see what the value is.
Don't worry, it's just being kept. I realize you guys are coming at this from different angles, but the Scope 3 discussion is so paramount. I mean, Alex, coming back to you, like, again, can you speak to examples from your customers about how your customers are thinking on a long-term basis about energy supply, and how working with a company like Caban helps them mitigate some of the wholesale volatility or bottlenecks we see with access to energy elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, first things first, we signed 20-year agreements. I don't think any other company is signing 20-year either power purchase agreements or service agreements where we deliver power in exchange for a flat fee. We get to deliver 99.99% uptime on the entire network, preventative, corrective, and energy delivery. And we have kind of those two different models, and we're signing 20-year agreements. And you would think that, well, that for a company like us, that's fantastic. That's recurring revenue. It's really clear. It's CPI protected, et cetera. For infrastructure investors, those are very bankable models, especially if your customers are very creditworthiness, have a high creditworthiness. I think from the customer's perspective, we're turning a fee that they're paying today that is very subject to the cost of oil, because most energy prices are pegged to the cost of oil, which is, it goes up and it goes down. Jamaica saw a 27% increase in the last 2 years. The European markets are seeing 12 to 15% increases on energy prices year over year. So we're taking a value that is a variable that is going up, mainly up, and we're flattening that over time so that operators can then more consistently know what their operating expenses are going to be in the future. And then we're taking over that risk, but that risk is it's managed because we're typically behind the meter, and we're managing our own assets, we're managing our own delivery of power. So it becomes a very predictable model from a power delivery perspective and also from a demand perspective, because we don't see demand changing. In fact, we see demand going up predictively over time.
Do you see, like, either in the regions you operate or regions you don't, like, where do you think the biggest gaps remain geographically of operators trying to get to a more predictable level of energy access like you're talking about? Like, I guess the flip side of that is where are the highest vulnerabilities right now that we need to be looking at?
It's a good question. So if you look at most emerging markets, they've had to have the conversation of where is just sort of by necessity, where's the cheapest form of power? And typically the cheapest form of power is going to come from a renewable source by dollar per kilowatt hour generated. Obviously it's not fuel, obviously it's not any other type of propane gas. So it's renewable. So emerging markets that have no access and no grid penetration have had to have those conversations first. I would say, I would probably say the U.S. is a market where it was very slow to move on, to move into a more proactive way of thinking about energy in a distributed way. But that has changed. That has changed over the last year due to the IRA bill that has been propelling us forward. We're a U.S. manufacturing company, so we have the capabilities on not only offering 30%, but an additional 10%. So there's a lot of things that we're getting as part of being a U.S. manufacturing company. But we operate in Brazil, in Colombia, in the Caribbean, Central America, and there are some regions that are much more advanced in the way that they think about resources just because they've had to.
Jason, I want to come back to the device recyclability point. Do you think we can get to a point where you're moving beyond handsets being recycled and redesigned to network equipment or other parts of the telecom industry that still contribute to Scope 3 emissions?
Absolutely. There's already some of that taking place. Network equipment has been reused and repurposed and sold for many, many years, but that is a market that is ripe to grow and to become more efficient. And how that happens, the old way is sending around lists and trying to, hey, I've got equipment that you might buy and consider, but there needs to be a much greater planning up front, if you will, with inventory, spares, technology replacement, and finding those markets that can reuse that equipment. And it comes back to that, what do you have? How much is it worth? And how can it really be reused somewhere else? If you don't know those three things, you really can't make a good decision. And whether it's a phone on a shelf or a base station sitting in a warehouse somewhere, it's probably just going to stay there until you can start more easily seeing the answer to those three questions and actually making a decision on it.
We just got a couple of minutes left because we're we've had so much discussion and we could keep going on. But I mean, Alex, looking ahead for your company and the way you see the industry, what do you think is the single biggest thing that you get excited about? And what do you think is the biggest challenge for your business and how you operate in this space in the next, say, 5 years?
I think the most exciting part is that 4 years ago, I don't think there was this much knowledge inside of our customers. I'm seeing customers have a dedicated sustainability team. I'm seeing customers have a knowledgeable, in most cases, like engineering-driven, data-driven decisions around energy, around resource management, and really thinking, moving away from this concept of I used to buy equipment through CapEx purchases into a service, into an energy as a service, for example, where they're offloading the part of energy at the network side to a company that focuses on energy, and that's what their expertise are on. So I'm seeing more of that happen. I'd say 4 years ago, I walked into Riyadh in Saudi, and I got laughed out of the room. And then 2 years later, I got a call back asking me to come back and present to their entire executive team. So yes, the cost of energy, the cost of oil there is as cheap as water, but every single operator has now a dedicated emission target reduction, and so and they're curious, and there's appetite and there's capital. That's what's interesting. I mean, hurdles. There's always going to be hurdles. I think biggest one is probably cost of capital right now. I think everybody is experiencing the same thing.
Jason, last word to you. Same question. Biggest thing you get excited about and the biggest challenge? Biggest thing is just seeing the rate of growth and the reusing and repurposing of devices and infrastructure. There are roughly 300 million smartphones that have been recycled this year, or used smartphone market. That's expected to get in the next few years to, really close to 500 million. It'll be interesting to see that growth continue and what that really means. Network equipment side, that is so early on. So to imagine what the potential is of seeing that network equipment replacement being repurposed as you move from one generation to the next, and it just kind of moves around into other places. I think that will be most impressive, but also looking at the power consumption and the transition to more efficient infrastructure
maybe at the expense of I'd like to reuse a lot of this stuff, and there will be a case for that, but also at some point it's going to be, hey, instead of reusing it, I think in this case the business decision might be, no, we're going to recycle that because we're bringing in something better and that is more energy efficient. So trying to figure out that balance of reuse or upgrade with more energy efficient infrastructure will be interesting to see. And that's going to be a tough challenge of making that decision, year after year after year as they go up to the technology replacement curve.
Somehow I think we might find ourselves at another conference here or elsewhere talking about this in the not too distant future, because there is so much interest. But we got to get to our last keynote. So guys, thank you very much for joining me on stage as late in the day, especially. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
We have our final speaker from vechain. How are you doing? Come on up. Good to see you. Thanks for sticking around. This is a really interesting company, so I would definitely encourage you to have a listen. And for our remote listeners, they will hear it there as well. So sure. Take it away.
All right. So,
all right.
Okay, hi everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Sunny, and I'm a co-founder and CEO of vechain. And vechain is a layer 1 blockchain platform focused on sustainability implementations. So actually, it's the second time for this year I've been to Vegas, and actually the first time it was not really good experience because surprisingly I experienced a big snow in Vegas. Could you imagine that? But honestly, consider about some other events like we see the tornado in Milan. We can see that climate change is really a real deal, and we should really focus on that. So I wanted to introduce to you guys how we want to use the Web3 technology to change the implementation of sustainability. So firstly, I want to share with you guys some interesting stuff, which is the crypto cycle. Also the blockchain cycle. It's like our World Cup. Every 4 years, it's a World Cup. 13, 17, 21, we all reach the all-time high in terms of the price for sure. But also we reach that kind of the most hot topic of the whole world. More and more professionals and people coming to that. However, the following year, we call all-time high +1, we call it crying year, because the price just dropped. But actually, more importantly, the +2, +3, we call it building year. So whatever you try to build, or whatever you make the contribution and make the efforts, it will decide how high you're gonna reach, right? So this year, 2023, following the next year, 2024, it's a very important building year for the entire blockchain space. So for vechain, we actually doing the same. We're following the same cycle. We have been published 3 times white paper. In 2017, we published the white paper to demonstrate what kind of infrastructure we try to build. So that's about the vechain itself. And in 2019, we published the second white paper, focused on the enterprise adoptions, because we believe this is a way how the blockchain technology can really creating the right value or real value for the whole world. And this year, early March, actually also in Vegas, we released the third white paper, which we co-authored with the BCG together. Well, you all know BCG, right? So the title we put in the new white paper, we call it Web3 for Better. So like I said, we wanted to use Web3 technology to innovate the way how we're going to implement the sustainability. So the first question is, why Web3? So let's go back a little bit. What is a Web 1? Web 1 is when the internet gets started. And actually most of people are focused on the connectivity first. We wanted to connect to the network. We want to connect to the internet. So the users are quite passive. Whatever the contents you see on the internet, you just receive it, you just read it, right? And the major successful company at that time were those hardware or infrastructure provider like IBM, Cisco, AT&T. And then we moved to the Web 2 is a mobility focus. Because people don't want to connect to the internet, but also they want to connect to the internet like from any time or anywhere. So the mobility is a focus and the user becomes more interactive. And going to the Web 3, actually, we're already in the, let's say, the last stage of Web 2 and or in between the transition period from Web 2 to the Web 3. So we can see whatever from the new X.com, like Twitter, also the TikTok, users are more focused on the creation, more focused on the contents. And also, like the Twitter or like the X.com, is already helping the user to monetize the creations. So that's actually the focus, or my understanding about the Web3 is more focused on the user creation and also how to help the user to monetize value and eventually make the user become the owner of my own creation, or specifically to say, my own data. So with the Web3, you can see we're able to, let's say, monetize the creation, monetize the activity, or AKA the data on the internet. And for sure, data on the blockchain will make it more meaningful, more trustworthy. So why sustainability? I mean, for sure, sustainability is the right thing to do. But why sustainability need the blockchain technology or need the Web3 technology? So we have been working with BCG for several months to analyze. Actually, I know lots of people heard about environmental change, climate change, but actually sustainability has much more pillars. I have two more pillars other than just environmental changes or environmental sustainability, also including the social sustainability and also economic sustainability. So we did run the sectors across the whole different industries, several different industries, and try to analyze what they need in terms of sustainability implementations, what we're missing from that. So simply to say, I think the enterprise, or let's say the major activity in the sustainability right now is still like a project basis. We heard about association, enterprise, or talk about sustainability project or sustainability campaign. But from our understanding is, sustainability should be the bottom of people's life, should be your daily life. Whatever you do, you can drink a coffee without paper or plastic bag, cup, or you can drive an EV other than fossil cars. Everything you do on a daily basis can be part of the contribution of sustainability. But how we can unify that, how we can make it as a collective value, and then we need a Web3. We're able to use the blockchain to verify your actions, verify your data, and also give you the in-time incentive. And eventually, all of the collective value can create real and greater impacts. So how vechain going to make it happen? 3 sections. We have done, in the last cycle, we have done hundreds of enterprises adoptions, applications. So what we try to do is we analyze all of the different type of use cases, for example, like food safety platform for Walmart, battery management, carbon credits for BYD as an EV company. For all of those cases, we try to analyze what could be the sustainability value coming from the existing applications. We just need to make a little bit upgrades so we can unify the users from those enterprises or from those products to give the sustainability value of that, following our narrative. And also on the other side, we work on the different products, technical products, to make the enterprise adoption or application building more easily. We launched the Voz, like it's a Web3 as a service platform, the new wallet, something like that. Also, very importantly, other than just the blockchain technology or any kind of mobility technology, we also work with National University of Singapore, led by Sir Constantine, a Nobel Prize winner, focus on the smart materials because we believe the new type of smart materials will help to create the new type of use cases for sustainability, for those kind of reproduction phases. And also in the center, we focus on the individual users. We focus on our communities. That's how we're going to do. So take an example. For a normal production of any kind of products, commercial products, almost every different steps of the cycle of the products can be renovated with a sustainability concept or with a recycled materials or with a lower carbon footprints. So every different steps can be generating the new type of social value or new type of sustainability value can be tracked and also incentivized by the blockchain technology, by the Web3. So we select several different use cases in the past we have done, like I mentioned, the carbon credits for BYD, SupplyMe is a supply chain finance, WOMA is for food safety platform, and along with RECEE is a plastic waste collection from the ocean. Okay, seems okay. And My Story, H&M, we have done like 100 different enterprise applications. So our new strategy is to upgrade those enterprise applications, plus the individual efforts incentivized by the Web3, by the token, can make really sustainability contributions. And eventually we believe after we building up the different type of sustainability ecosystem, the entire biosphere can create a new type of business model. Think about that. Every individual users, has been done like, let's talk about like 1 million users globally. They may do a very fractional efforts in terms of sustainability efforts, right? You drive, let's say 5 miles EV, the carbon credits could be, worth cents or even less than cents. But how are you going to monetize that? But if you think about, I have 10 million users around the whole world driving averagely 10 miles a day or 5 miles a day, all of the collective value of the data could show really great impacts. And those people should be incentivized. And also the people who drive like big tank, get fossil cars should be punished. But I'm saying punished, but eventually let's talk about resource optimization. Eventually let them to be the sponsor to encourage people, incentivize people to do more sustainability activity on a daily basis. I think that's a key how we're going to do the real change in terms of sustainability. So what vechain actually providing from the technical infrastructure, how are we going to make the blockchain applications building according to different type of use cases. So basically we focus on the infrastructure part, the technology part. That's what we do. We're a layer 1 blockchain platform. So firstly, our platform itself is very environmental friendly. It's very low carbon footprints generated by every year. So actually, lots of people have a misconception about blockchain generates wasting power, or talk about the Bitcoin, how much energy has been wasted. But that's, let's say, the first generation of the blockchain technology coming from Bitcoin. But actually, with the new technologies like what vechain has been doing, we really have a very small carbon footprint. So basically, you can see some really incredible numbers. It's a 3 zeros here, right? So every transaction actually costs 0.000216 kilowatts for that kind of the transactions. So, or simply to say, the entire carbon emission for the vechain blockchain for a whole year equals just 0.4% of generating or mining one single Bitcoin. So the technology can really make, let's say, environmental friendly blockchain platforms. And also we have 100% online, zero outage since 2018. So it's already 5 years. We don't have any kind of outage. Pretty reliable. And the Vault I just mentioned, it's a very simple tool. So we call it a Web3 as a service. So for any user, just go through a few clicks, you're able to create your own smart contract, issue your own token, or mint your NFT. And even better, we use the fee delegation feature. We can pay for you. So for example, you can mint your own 5,000 NFT for free to get started. So then we're able to make any kind of enterprise or even individual builders to do your own application to support whatever you want to do very easily. And also we just launched the new wallet. There is an iOS version, Android version, extension version. So it's pretty good to use. Actually, it's not just a wallet per se. Wallet is more just technical terms in terms of crypto users. But we want to make it as a portal to access any future sustainability applications. And last but not least, the new Explorer of vechain Stats is also can calculate in time the carbon footprints or carbon emissions for the entire blockchain. And later on, when you do an online transaction, when you mint an NFT or execute any kind of smart contract, you will know exactly how much carbon emission from this action. And then you can have that kind of awareness. Even you can choose like, okay, I wanted to pay a little bit more to offset this kind of carbon emission to make eventually the entire vechain blockchain and applications running on that to be the carbon neutrality. So that is our target as well. So, and also along with the technical challenges, we already got like 12,000 builders to focus on building different type of blockchain applications to support sustainability. And we're targeting to have the next hackathon in Boston. If you guys are interested, come to Boston. It will be October 6 to 8. We're going to have a 3 days hackathon to compete with the different candidates to see like what kind of the innovative ideas to support sustainability. So in summary, we're targeting to build up sustainability ecosystem on the Web3, coming from the hundreds of enterprise adoption cases we have done in the last few years. And also we wanted to implement the new tokenomics and gamification to attract the individual users and eventually unite everyone along with the enterprise case so we are able to create the collective value to be the more or greater impacts. Okay, so thank you very much.